All right, good. Let's turn that on and we'll get going. Thank you for your patience. Let's see if my share screen works. Okay, so are we recording?
I saw the record button come up. So
okay, good. And
good.
Next question is, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So I have now lost the ability to see anybody or to see any questions or comments in the chat. So if you have any questions as we go along, please do feel free to interrupt me rather loudly so that I know you have a question. Otherwise, I'll take questions at the end. The introductory presentation shouldn't take too long here. The idea is really to give an overview of the project and then have some discussion. So what I would like to cover is how the team plans to use PRISM DIDs, and that's decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials, to improve the Catalyst proposal assessor process. So the project objectives and the history, I think many of us in this room and many of us in the Cardano and the Catalyst community are in agreement that self-sovereign identity provides a fundamentally better way to navigate the digital world. And this project allows the Catalyst community to begin to utilize and benefit from self-sovereign identity and PRISM, which is Cardano's implementation of self-sovereign identity. So I'm not planning to go into deeply into the details of what self-sovereign identity or PRISM is. If you're interested to learn more about either of those topics, the second link here introduces the concept and discusses the current project. I've also linked our successful Fund 8 proposal, and I've provided the link to the proof space team who are providing the technology that is powering this proposal. So going from the really big picture of let's get self-sovereign identity into the hands of the Catalyst community down to the details of where are we going to start? How are we going to begin to do that? And the project's starting point is looking at the proposal assessor process. And there are a lot of known issues, which I'm sure will be familiar to many people in the room. So proposal assessors sometimes have a lack of knowledge of what they're doing and what they're reviewing, and that can lead to low quality reviews. There are low barriers to entry to being a proposal assessor, and that's wonderful. One of the beautiful things about Catalyst is how easy it is for anybody, anywhere in the world, with just a few requirements to, having access to the internet and speaking some English, to be able to join this incredible experiment. But it also means the low barriers to entry means that friends can write biased reviews. I think we've all seen that. Because of the low barriers of entry, there's no proof of life, which means that the system can be subjected to bot attacks. And anonymity of proposal assessors, which I think is incredibly important and a really critical feature of how the process works. But it also means that because PAs are anonymous, we don't have any kind of a reputation system. So what did the proposal, which was successfully funded in Fund 8, aim to, how are we going to change that? So here's how the process would work. Proposal assessors would attend an online onboarding course. And this is a course that the Catalyst School has already been running.
Allison, I think these slides are not moving.
You are seeing the main slide only, because it's nothing on the presentation, I think.
If you refresh your browser, see if that'll do it.
It's
or the slides that we're seeing is
now it's
Yep.
There we go.
Now we go. Yeah.
But now you're seeing, okay. You're seeing the slide,
SSI enabled PA slide.
Okay, but in not in presenter mode, right? You're gonna have to deal with.
Correct.
Yeah, editor.
You have to switch. Yeah, you have to switch. Good.
There you go.
Can you see the slides moving now?
Yeah.
So which slide are you seeing now?
So last
Slide
time,
4.
We're
Yeah.
seeing editor mode, Allison, but it's fine. I think we can see. Now it's number 3.
Yeah, okay, I've got to stay in editor mode. Sorry. Okay, things may break. So I'll just recap quickly slide 3 so you get the visual too. So the known problems with the current proposal assessor process. Lack of knowledge can lead to low quality reviews. Low barriers to entry, while they're wonderful, sometimes means that friends write biased reviews. No proof of life means that the system is vulnerable to bot attacks. And anonymity, which is really important, means that we don't have a reputation system for proposal assessors. So the proposal, which was funded in Fund 8, attempts to change this by leveraging an existing onboarding course that the Catalyst School is already running. So proposal assessors attend this online course, and at the end of the course, they get the Catalyst School issues them a verifiable credential using proof-based technology, which the proposal assessor can then hold in their identity wallet. And I'm happy to report we did a test of that portion of the process in Fund 9, and we issued something like 30 verifiable credentials to proposal assessors who attended the onboarding course. So what we're hoping to do for Fund 10 is get to the verification side of the process. So in Fund 10, the proposal assessors who've received the verifiable credential will present their VC when they register in Ideascale. IOG, again, using the proofs-based technology, will verify that that credential was properly issued and is attached to the proposal assessor. IOG will then match the credential to the proposal assessor's Assessor ID, which is the anonymous handle that proposal assessors are known by in Ideascale. During the QA phase. And as an important part of the proof of concept, the verifiable credential won't be publicly visible during Fund 10. But after Fund 10 is completely concluded, we can use the verifiable credential attached to the Assessor ID to perform data analysis on the data that's generated during the QA phase. And the hypothesis is post Fund 10 data analysis hopefully will show that the low quality review problem will be addressed because we'll see that training improves review quality. The problem of friendly reviews will be addressed because attending the course requires at least a little bit of investment of time. So it won't be so easy just to get friends to show up, write one friendly review and not do anything else. The bot attack problem is addressed because the course would provide a version of proof of life. And as a side benefit, it would also restrict people's abilities to create multiple accounts in Ideascale because it's difficult to hold multiple onboarding credentials in the same identity wallet. You'd have to have the identical credential in the same identity wallet. You'd have to have multiple phones or perform some other kind of workaround. And possibly what I'm most excited about the solution is that this could provide the very early building blocks for the development of a reputation system that's combined with anonymity. Because while the data won't be visible for the proof of concept in Fund 10, down the road, we could have all kinds of verifiable credentials that are visible with the assessor's anonymized assessor number. So you would never know the identity of of a particular proposal assessor, but you could see that they'd taken an onboarding course, for example, or you could see that perhaps they'd taken the Flutist Pioneers program or the PRISM Pioneers program. And we can start to build up information about the assessor, but keep that person's identity anonymous. And the hypothesis is that that would improve the quality of the proposal assessor process. For the Fund 10 purposes, we're testing this idea by running the pilot with just the onboarding course and then looking at the data to see what it shows. And my hope is we'll see something like, no proposal assessors who took the onboarding course will have any filtered out reviews. none of them will be assumed to be bots. All of them will have excellent reviews. Now, I mean, that's a little overly optimistic, but the idea is to do this as an experiment, that we'll run the proof of concept and we'll see what the data shows us after the fact, and then we'll use that to plan the next steps. So what I was hoping, what I'd like to hear from the audience tonight is, what do you think about that proposed change to the proposal assessor process? And what feedback do you have for the proposal team? And then, of course, to encourage everybody to watch for the Fund 10 Catalyst School onboarding course, take part and receive your very own PRISM verifiable credential. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I look forward to taking any questions or comments.
So might I go?
Go ahead, and then we'll come to George, who's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. I just missed the last bit, but how would I go to register for that Catalyst school? I just heard the last bit, like join us for Fund 10.
So there's no registration required for the Catalyst School onboarding course. The Catalyst School group of volunteers will post the details of their courses on their Discord server and in Telegram and through the town hall.
Perfect.
So
Lovely.
yeah, exactly. Okay, George, your turn. And I just realized I need a pen so I could take notes. But I'm listening, George, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question was, is this going to be optional? Some people can sign up to do this process via using this SSI experiment, and some of them people don't have to. Is that correct?
That is completely correct. The way the proposal was written, it called for the course to be mandatory. And I still think that could be a very interesting and useful approach. However, that's too much to do all at once. So as a first step for this proof of concept, taking the onboarding course is optional, as it always has been. And for anybody taking the course, getting the verifiable credential and then passing it to IOG is also optional. I will be strongly encouraging everybody to do so, because I think the data will be interesting to see the impact on the proposal assessor process. And the more data we have, the better the conclusions we can draw. I'm also really excited about the first time PRISM decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials will actually be used for real utility in the Catalyst ecosystem. So that's a really exciting first step in and of itself. But all of it at this stage is completely optional.
Which leads me to my second thought of, if it was optional, then I would be dubious on the data that comes out of it, because for instance, myself would be a keen bean to try that solution out, and it'll most likely be the keen beans who go down that route and say, let's do these extra things and try this new thing. So the data would, I would assume, would likely say these are the guys who are like the go hard being nefarious, that they would well, so then these are great and these guys aren't, so this solution solves it, which is a false result really, because it's like it's like an obvious reason not to do it. So that's the only thing that comes to my mind, the way what people need to do rather than what they can optionally do.
Yeah, so you broke up a little bit there, but I think I hear your point about selection bias. And the alternative, I think, would have been to make it mandatory. And I just don't think anybody's ready to go there yet. So we'll have to look at the data carefully and see what conclusions we can reasonably draw. The only thing I'll say is the Catalyst school proposal assessor course, I think it's a useful thing to do for people who are familiar with the process already to get up to speed on any changes for Fund 10, but it really is designed for people who are newer to the system. And I will be encouraging new entrants to Catalyst to take that course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good comment though. Marcus, hello. Go ahead.
So the did that we once made, this was just a test, right? The one with
Yes.
PRISM. Because I just wanted to log in and it said, okay, I need to create a new wallet. So yeah.
Yeah, so that test was done using ProofSpace Indie credentials. So now that ProofSpace has fully integrated the PRISM capabilities, unfortunately, the wallet has to be updated to account for the differences between PRISM and Indie.
Okay, perfect. So then I will start signing up. Right.
But I am pleased that we'll be able to use the PRISM credentials for the Fund 10 pilot.
Okay, cool. That's good. That's perfect. Thank you.
Rodolfo.
Yeah, so I like the idea to be mandatory. So that's going to be beneficial. Yeah. But my question is, do you see that the credential is going to be public available only for IOC documents? Because I'm worried about if you can correlate somehow who was taking the course and then who can maybe find who is the PA, right? Trying to avoid that part.
Yeah, and preserving the anonymity is the most important part of the proof of concept, and IOG is completely focused on that, as am I, as is the proposal team. There shouldn't be any way, just because you know an assessor number and the fact that they have a credential, to correlate that to what the identity is. I mean, at best, I think maybe you could make a guess of whether or not that person had attended the onboarding course.
Yeah, I mean,
but
because
as far as
if you have a credential, maybe you're gonna have the date that the credential was issued, and maybe in that Zoom meeting, they're gonna be only 6 people. So at least you know that one of those 6 is gonna be, and then you can start correlating.
Yeah, so while the credential itself has all kinds of flexibility to include other data, such as the date that it was issued, the only data point that will be on the final spreadsheet is a true or false. True, the assessor number has the credential, or false, they don't.
Okay,
that's
great.
it. No,
Okay,
no other data.
Great. That's what the question. It's only that the checkpoint is fine. Yeah, at least for the first iteration.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I suppose it's a good point. I guess I would say that the proposal team will need to see the data because we're the ones doing the analysis. My intention was to make it public so that everybody can draw the same conclusion, have the data be as public as possible. But perhaps what I should say is, for the pilot, we'll give IOG the right and the proposal team the right to review the data first. And if there's any concern that somebody's anonymity could be compromised, we won't share the data, because that anonymity is, I mean, I'm a proposal assessor. I write a lot of reviews. So it's really important to me, and I'll be participating in the pilot. So it's really important to me that anonymity is not compromised.
Okay, great.
Marcus.
Yeah, that's exactly the topic that I wanted to ask again. I'm on the opposite side regarding the anonymity, because I think our space, like online, it fosters this, as you said. The problem is that there's a lot of PAs that don't have an idea actually what they're talking about, and then there's that team that says, if I do a proposal, then I have to fear that if the proposal is negative, the proposals will go after me. That's a fear that is around. And then there's the did that could be associated with a certain PA. To address the first two, my mother was a teacher, and she said to me, there's two options for me as a teacher, how I can correct an essay. This could be pro the student or contra the student, or do you say against the student? So pro student would be, I always write in a manner that the student would learn from my assessment. And if not being anonymous, then the PA would be forced to write in a manner that the proposer will learn. That would be my argument for being public. And why not recreating the did with every new fund? That would be my other question to it.
So let me make some comments on the technical nature of the did first, and then we can come back to the anonymity. And I'll caveat my comments about the did by saying that I am not a coder. So I come from the business side of things. I was a banker before I joined the Cardano world. So anybody feel free to jump in if I go astray here, if I get this wrong. But the vision of self-sovereign identity is that any individual through their identity wallet could create multiple, if not infinite, DIDs that would all be controlled by the same private key, so that they could have a unique connection with every different person or entity or organization or company that they connect to. It's one of the ways that the vision of SSI helps to preserve individuals' privacy and keeps surveillance capitalism, the way that the big companies track us across multiple sites today by correlating our email address and other data points about us to really build up a profile of our behavior and you know, our potential marketing targets. So the idea with DIDs, decentralized identifiers, is that individuals could have more control over their identity and more privacy by using a separate DID for each connection. One of the things that I've learned through the course of this pilot is that PRISM isn't quite there yet. So we don't have multiple PRISM DIDs to enable that level of anonymity. So there are a couple of different ways to approach that. Proofspace has some flexibility because they also have their own Hyperledger Indy implementation that does allow multiple DIDs. And the other way that we're doing that we're approaching that right now is that we're not ready yet to use the DID as an identifier. The PRISM DID as an identifier, because there's too much risk that the PRISM DID could then become a correlator to, I think it was Rodolfo, I forget who was making the point about privacy and data, if it was George or Rodolfo, but I wouldn't want somehow somebody's DID to become public when they were doing the Catalyst course, and then they give their DID attached to their Assessor ID, and suddenly the person is doxxed. So it's two things. The decentralized identifier should ultimately be a tool to help preserve privacy, but we're watching that very carefully to ensure that that really happens and that we don't move more quickly than the technology allows. That was the technology. Oh, the anonymity. So I mean, I'm curious for that. I see this come up a lot on Twitter and Telegram, whether or not proposal assessors should be anonymous. I hear your point that proposal assessors are more likely to give positive, constructive feedback if they have to be public about it. And I think that would be one way of approaching some of the other issues that I'd mentioned with the process. But there's already a lot of discussion and feeling that Catalyst has become a popularity contest. And I think one of the checks on that is allowing anonymous reviews so that people aren't afraid of speaking critically about powerful or well-known or well-liked personalities in the Catalyst ecosystem. Because I think it could be, you know, if everybody knows that Roots ID has a fantastic proposal, but let's say they have a down day, and I'm picking on you guys because I was trying to think of one of the strongest, smartest, best proposals in the teams in the ecosystem. Who's going to be the one who wants to say, hey, wait, I don't think we should fund this one because everybody knows what a great job Roots team does. I think that could be a really hard position to be in, but we do need to be able to be critical of each other. Not that I ever expect that Roots would have a bad proposal. I really can't imagine that happening.
But it would be an idea to publish the name after the voting, so that you still could be held accountable for what you actually do, or you at least yourself have a feeling you gotta be honest about what you write and put some positive intention into it. That's I totally understand the manipulation side of, okay, this is a famous assessor, let's go there. But after the after the voting has been done, after all the decisions have been made, then you could actually see, okay, was there some malicious intent? Could we go and see this assessor needs some more training, or he needs some guidance, or she needs some guidance into the right direction? That was just the idea.
Marcus, there's
Yeah,
a
sorry.
second stage, like the VPA. So the VPA handle that at least a bit of doing this kind of work of trying to see who is the good, who is the excellent, and who is the bad guy.
Yeah,
Not
but
completely your idea, but
currently you have the discussion about the VPAs as well. So
yeah.
it's not solving the problem at the end. It's just putting it to another level, escalating it. But yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in with an opinion, and this is general true in the blockchain space, or anybody using public key encryption. Is it's up to the user of those to be very careful to not get doxed, to not create collaboration or correlation between their various signing activities and so forth. And it's hard to do that, and it's hard to create a good user interface for the average layperson that helps that, because it's so easy to get correlated. However, that's really not the burden of, that shouldn't be the burden of a verifier. A verifier should be say, what's your DID issuing organization or person, and what's the reputation of that DID, and that's the pattern laid out in the verifiable credential spec, et cetera. So to make that pseudonymous, et cetera, or sorry, to completely hide that, I don't understand how else that would be provided, that reputational stamp, if you will, of who the issuer of the credentials are.
So we wouldn't hide the issuer of the credential. I'm talking about keeping the proposal assessors DID private for now.
Oh, that's also what I meant, though. How do you know it's a valid proposal for assessor as opposed to a non-valid proposal assessor?
So the only thing that will be verified is whether or not the proposal assessor is holding a verifiable credential, attesting to the fact that they completed the onboarding course.
Oh,
Regarding
okay. So IOG is the issuer of that credential.
Catalyst School is the issuer of the credential. IOG is the verifier.
Correct.
Okay.
But
So-
we're not yet today using self-sovereign identity for the whole proposal assessor login and verification and authentication process. Unfortunately, we're still reliant on the Web 2 Ideascale username and password, and we're reliant on IOG's assessor ID as an anonymizer for the proposal assessor's identity. What we're adding into the process today for the proof of concept is one optional verifiable credential.
Got it. That helps. I had the issuers in backwards in my mind. Thank you.
Sure. Philip, go ahead.
Yeah, I love the idea. I think it's a big step forward, and I think Ed makes a good point. Like, DIDs are a tool in our toolbox. I don't think it will magically solve human relations and things like that. Just to go to counter Marcus a little bit and to go over the reputation thing in Catalyst is, I believe, like in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, we would need to have a closed loop in Catalyst. We now still have an open loop because the auditing part and the checkup part is not really there. If in the ideal world, how I would do it is, okay, we have the proposers, they can be anonymous. We have PAs, they can be anonymous. We have VPAs, they can be anonymous. I don't care. Voters, they have to vote with their conscience, so let's keep them out of this. And Philip makes a project, and it doesn't have to be my name, it can be alias, whatever. And I propose what to do, and I get money. And if I do it, PAs that gave me a higher score get some reputation there. VPAs that helped with that get some reputation there. If I fail, they don't, right? If I use the money, if I spend the money and I don't deliver on anything, then we lose the score. Then it doesn't really matter, you know, if I am Philip or someone else, or if the PA is this and someone else. And then we kind of ingrain the value of saying, hey, look, the point of this is to develop Cardano, or, you know, to bring in something. And if the voter said that my proposal has goals that are worthy of chasing, and I chased those goals and I achieved them, then that's good, supposedly, for the whole ecosystem, right? So then we can get away from the fact of, oh, well, you know, Kyle likes me and Dan doesn't like me and I like this and blah, blah, blah. You know, it doesn't really matter. If I deliver on what I want to deliver, everybody who kind of supported me on the way gets a good reputation. And if I fail, we all basically fail. That's, you know, DIDs don't solve that. That's another problem, but DIDs help with that a lot. And I think what Allison is saying, it just enables us to have, not, we don't have to have it, but we can, or we don't have to have an anonymizing layer or a decentralized way to verify. She says, yes, IOG is the verifier. In the current iteration it is, but we want all of us to be verifiers tomorrow. Issuers is Catalyst cool because yes, we have to start somewhere, but we can have 10 different issuers, technical issuers for this skill, blah, 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 all of that. And it just decentralizes power from one way. So I think that's definitely a good thing.
Yes, thank you. Excellent comments. And that is a really good point. That I want to just, that's such a good point. I want to stress it again. For the proof of concept, it just so happens that Catalyst School is the only issuer we have for the verifiable credential, and IOG today is the only verifier. But that is purely the mechanics of running a very simple proof of concept. But absolutely, the vision is that there could be many, many issuers of all kinds of different credentials that could potentially build up a PA's reputation or anyone else's reputation in the Catalyst ecosystem, for that matter, maybe a proposer, maybe, you know, a collaborator, and that, yes, all of us could then verify these credentials, or lots of different entities and individuals could become verifiers. That is absolutely the vision. So thank you for making that point. Torsten.
Yeah, I just want to follow up effectively on what was said. We have to be a bit careful to measure success. Failure can also be success if it more or less is something which becomes a learning for the community in itself. And I think this has always been a little bit of an issue. So whatever we do and whatever we credential, it should actually kind of like measure against, and you see, I can submit a proposal, have the intent to fulfill, recognize the intent in itself is not fulfillable. that is a valuable recognition in itself, because it could prevent that other people go down the same rabbit hole. That should not lead to the fact that it more discredits effectively people who have said this is a good proposal in itself. Yeah. So I mean, the point is there is just an arm's length what you can check when you get a proposal, and things can fail on the execution phase in a number of different ways, due to a number of different elements. And it can be, you can have the best team in the world and you still don't put effectively people in a rocket to the moon. So what I'm trying to say here is, when we do that, we also have to be careful that we're not kind of like getting too one-sided and miss out on emphasizing effectively the learning for the community. I totally agree that if someone says, I just tried to do something and never had actually the intention, and it becomes quite obvious that that has to have consequences. Yeah. But I don't think that identity and credentials in itself, well, credentials perhaps, but it really depends on, is it direct or indirect, who gets punished on that? Because what is not good is that we are experimenting with things which we in some cases really don't know how they pan out. Yeah, is it a good or bad idea? Well, the experiment in itself is almost there to prove that it can or cannot be done, and the result as such is already valuable. Yeah, so we have to reflect it also in the credentialing process. Failure in itself, if it is handled in the right way, is good, as it is success. Yeah, if I achieve what I try to achieve, great. If I don't achieve what I try to achieve, but I understand why, that's good too. Yeah, so that's my only comment on the point of the credentialing. So that's not just one-sided. We intend at the moment to measure success always on, we successfully delivered, and never talk about what was hard or where could someone else learn from what happened. And that's kind of like a little bit of a dangerous path, because that means you just have to succeed to close a project successfully. And I think we are putting a lot of pressure on the community in some cases with this way of thinking. And should be careful kind of not to push the same thinking in the credentialing space, because that would drive us wrong, from my perspective, down the wrong rabbit hole.
Yeah, thank you for that, Torsten. Philip, I saw your hand up. Did you have a
Yeah, I think
follow-on
Torsten-
point?
Yeah, just 1 minute. I think Torsten reacted to my saying success and the closed system and the reputation. While I understand Torsten's point, I would be a little bit stricter with the community, but okay, that's just my thing. That's not something that, I get to decide. Or learning curve is definitely an experience. I would just say to the proposer, hey, one of the goals can be learning, and you can openly say, if I fail, at least that's one way that I find that it doesn't work. And if the community finds that acceptable and they vote you in, fine, right? But that's on the community to decide. Also, I think we're semantically mixing up credentials and reputation. Credential is, let's say, an quote unquote objective measure that I did something or that I know something or things like that. Reputation is other people's opinion of me, right? So I can affect my reputation by doing what I think is best, but I cannot affect how other people think of me. And there is no, I would argue that there is not even a quantifiable way to, because someone can wake up in the morning and have a great opinion of me, and then I do something stupid and they have a horrible opinion of me by the end of the evening. So reputation is something extrinsic of me. So it's very, very difficult, I would say impossible to measure. And reputation is a social thing. So all we can do is quantify parts of it and call it a credential or a measure of success or something, a point. But that's far away from reputation, in my opinion.
Fair point.
I agree with that.
Marcus, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm with Philip. We're drifting away from the initial presentation, but I want to sit in between Philip and Torsten's ideas. From it, both answer my initial thoughts. Philip's ideas goes very well with the previously presented new milestone approach. So we can measure projects or proposals by the milestones they present, because as a PA, we are a guideline for the voter, how we see the proposers being able to structure their ideas. And by weighing in with our opinion, not opinionizing on the actual feasibility of the product, we add our opinion anyway. So yeah, this was confusing, sorry. But the gist of it is, I think it's a good idea to set the milestones as an approach to get the reputation of the PA right, and to bind it to that. But at the same time, if it is argumented well, then failure could be an option too. So that's just been the 2 cents that I was sat on my chair now with.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. And Selim, you've had your hand up for a little while now.
Hi, thanks. Maybe it's because I don't know like all the intricacies of the DIDs, but from my understanding of it, it seems to be a discrete measurement in the sense that it's like either true, false, or it's on the scale to 1 to 10, for instance, or whatever the scale is. And so correct me if I'm wrong, or if it's like completely out of topic, but
Yeah,
if it's
so
discrete, yeah, go ahead.
So I think we might be mixing a couple of concepts there. The DID is a decentralized identifier. So it's a way of cryptographically representing someone's identity with a public address that's controlled by their private key.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then the credential a verifiable credential issued to a DID can have a huge flexible amount of data. For this project, this proof of concept, the credential will be completely binary. It will either represent that yes, this DID completed the onboarding course, or no, they did not. So only for this project will the DID be binary true. Sorry, the credential be binary true false, but that's not the nature of credentials generally. We've really narrowed down the functionality.
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
Okay.
Then you've answered the question. Thank you.
Oh, okay, good. I've seen a lot going on in the chat, but I haven't been able to follow it. Are there any open questions that have been typed that we need to address?
Don't think so.
Okay, good.
I was interested, how is it all going on proof space in terms of hosting everything, and how is that process for IOG verifying things? Just to go through that maybe a little bit.
Yeah, so I can speak to that at a high level. The dashboards are available to Catalyst School and IOG through the Proof Space Identity Center. Anybody using Proof Space has the option to run the tool on their own server, so that it's not hosted or visible by Proof Space at all. Whether IOG will go that route for this proof of concept, I don't know. But the most important data that would link any identifying information about the proposal assessor and their public assessor ID will never flow through any proofs-based technology anyway. So there are lots of options as far as data privacy for future implementations where more sensitive data might be incorporated into a verifiable credential, but for the purposes of this proof of concept, it's not a really relevant point because all of that's happening in the IOG backend exactly the way it's happening today.
Allison, can I ask a
Any,
question on that one?
Sure.
Data privacy needs an ownership. How is this going to be handled with this proof of concept? Who owns effectively whatever kind of personal data is in the system?
IOC owns everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the simple
because the
answer.
only link is
IOC.
IOC, yeah. It's Ideascale plus the proof space credential that is not tied to any.
Yeah, but legally, kind of, you have to have someone who kind of assumes a specific role, which is legally defined, at least in certain jurisdictions. So, for example, if you're collecting something, if it's IOG and IOG agrees with that and says we are fine, we're taking this role, and we're happy with it, that's fine. It's just like we're putting a new component in, which is not necessarily under their remit, but legally it still needs effectively an ownership.
Yes, no, it's a good question. I mean, again, the vast majority of data ownership and privacy responsibility won't change. It's exactly the way it works today. So Ideascale and IOG have the bulk of that. There are legal SLAs between Catalyst School and ProofSpace and IOG and ProofSpace that are entered into whenever anybody starts using the technology, and that's been developed with the on the ProofSpace side and is being negotiated with, or I should say, discussed with IOG. And I'm gonna get out of my depth here pretty quickly, but it's a good point, and it's one that IOG is very much on top of.
Okay, because legally we can get in really hot water in this context. Yeah, because there are some requirements, there's some obligations, which at least in the EU is kind of outlined by law. And it also means that, and I don't know whether IOG kind of like is covering that basis at the moment or not. But now when we are starting to connect effectively identifiable data, which kind of with something else, then by a sudden the protection of the individual in itself becomes really relevant. Also from a law perspective. And there are roles which are defined, which have to be also kind of fulfilled.
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, I think one of the really big issues that's somewhat unaddressed in our Catalyst process today is the relationship that Ideascale has to all of our data. I mean, we upload and input all kinds of information into Ideascale. And I think that actually the terms that we have to agree to when we sign up to an Ideascale account give Ideascale a huge amount of control over the data that we're uploading to them.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't want to go into that rabbit hole right now, but I'm happy kind of if you reach out to me kind of to help you a little bit also on the data privacy side. So it's related to GDPR in Europe, but there are also regulations around the world which kind of kicking in this context, and we can be blissfully ignorant for it and then kind of gonna be grilled on a very hot grill, which also imposes in some cases quite significant fines in that context.
So yes, so I will just say, thankfully, this is not me developing software or me bringing my GDPR expertise or data privacy expertise to bear. ProofSpace has been using their technology with a lot of sensitive data for years now and has really done a lot of work in this space.
Yeah, the point is more Project Catalyst in itself, and that in that context at the moment IOG, and I'm happy take a certain role, which is of a data controller, and whoever is processing data itself takes a role of a data processor, but the controller in itself has legally obligations they have to fulfill to tell the sub-processor or the processor what they can do with the data or not. So as we are kind of now pushing that out, specifically now in the context of PAs and VPAs, which was kind of anonymous in the past, but now it becomes more tightened up. We just have to make sure that we're not sitting at the end of the day in a situation where where IOG says, well, it's not our business. Yeah, and then by a sudden it starts to circle kind of, who is it? I can tell you the authorities don't take hostage. If you cannot clearly name roles and horses, then they catch everyone.
Yeah, I
And
still
the
don't
fine-
know who's paying the
And the
catalyst
fine,
funds,
and
right?
but the fine in itself can be quite significant. So I mean, it's obviously more tailored around the corporate environments, and the decentralized environments are not really understood and covered so much. But I just mention it here. It's something which we have to consider in this context.
All good points, Torsten. And my only point is, and I think you alluded to this, these are really important questions, regardless of whether or not proof space or DIDs or verifiable credentials are used or not. I mean, they're really important questions about what happens to all of our data that we are giving to.
Because Ideascale would say,
Catalyst.
well, we are just providing a service to IOG because they ordered this from us. They become the controller. We are just the processor. They would have had to tell us how we have to deal with the data. At the end of the day, legally that doesn't stand because both of them will kind of get fined. But at the end of the day, together with I'm becoming a data controller is an obligation to nominate a data privacy officer. There are some considerations in context with data breaches and so on and so on and so on. And that's not specific for your project, but in this context, we're getting closer and closer to collect effectively personal identifiable information. You could always say in the past, it wasn't that much that case. I just want to make sure that whatever you do doesn't kind of backfire at the end of the day.
The only thing I don't understand about what you're saying is when you say we're getting closer and closer to collecting personal data, I would say we're already collecting a huge amount of personal data. I mean, no additional personal data is collected through this project. I mean, decentralized identifiers are generated.
Yeah, the main challenge which changes here now is in the past, the data which was collected was solely in the ownership and responsibility of IOG.
And Ideascale.
Yeah, but Ideascale is a service which has been purchased in inverted commas by IOG. So legally, IOG is still the data controller. They are collecting the data. Whatever technical tool they're using doesn't really matter. What we're doing now is we're starting to move that out of the IOG legal responsibility into Project Catalyst. And that now could be said, well, that's a DAO, but who is actually part of that DAO? And who stands legally then for the right processing of that data?
Yeah, the question
It is a DAO, Torsten. Catalyst is IOG, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There is no
Catalyst is
doubt.
IOG, it's only IOG.
Yeah, exactly.
If they see it the same way and they act upon it and more or less say, yeah, we kind of with this project, which we're running here as part of Catalyst, they take the ownership in the same way, all good. But if that's not clear, then it becomes really tricky.
But even
I mean,
if there would be two separate entities, the question would be if Catalyst if the token would be sufficient enough to make Catalyst a data processor. So I think what you're referring to is still IOG in the end.
yeah, I mean, there's no
catalyst.
There is no catalyst entity. And so leaving SSI completely aside, I've been asking this question and raising this issue around how does everybody account for funds that are received from Catalyst or staked through Catalyst or stake pool operators? What is the source of funds? Because it can't be Catalyst. Catalyst isn't an entity. It can't be the Cardano blockchain treasury because that's also not an entity.
The question is a slightly different one. The question is, if you received funds to implement something, are you at that moment in time becoming also for a certain type of data, the data controller? And who is the owner of that in that context? If IOG says it's not us, then the question is, who is it? And that's the question which has to be answered. If they say, yeah, it's us, then it's fine. But if they say, yeah, but this was funded through Project Catalyst, and what, because IOG, for example, is not responsible for the projects which have been executed. They just say, they will say, we just gave a grant, but the legal responsibility lies with the people who are kind of dealing with this topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I see your point, and I'd come back to, and I don't have, I come back to this topic of data privacy and responsibility for data privacy, and particularly GDPR, because there are a lot of European entities, or a lot of European focus.
Yeah,
is one that everybody involved in this project is taking very seriously, and there are a lot of legal level conversations happening around the responsibility for the data.
that's fine. I just want to mention it, that's all. If it's taken care of, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. And it is, we're really breaking new ground here. I mean, I've been beating the drum about the source of funds one because that comes more to my background as a banker, but there is a big mismatch between what we are doing here, this sort of revolution experiment, this blockchain treasury and decentralized innovation fund, and the legacy requirements and regulations and laws that we all have to comply with.
And
I mean, it is
totally get that. Yeah, it's still you will still kind of like have to withstand the heat which comes out of the old school legislation, which more or less probably is not recognizing that, and they will take a very blunt approach in some cases. Yeah, and there is a naivety just because we put it on blockchain. We're not under the legislation anymore. Actually, we are, and that kind of the blissful ignorance in this context can create significant problems and also quite significant fines, which, due to the nature of the beast, they will judge then in the context of, okay, in that case, it was a cooperation of a number of individuals, so everyone in itself, kind of like, depending on the law, whoever prosecutes you, will say, well, all of them kind of have a liability in that context. And the liabilities in this context can be quite significant. I don't want to scare you. What I'm trying to say is we have to just square that properly away.
Yeah,
yes,
hopefully I don't live in
100%
Europe.
agree.
Yeah. I'm based in Argentina. So
doesn't make a difference.
It's your problem.
Brazil is introducing, or you're in Argentina. Brazil was introducing something lately, and I mean, this is not a trivial problem.
No, I know. Just shocking. Yeah, just shocking. I agree with you.
Anushka, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that this is a very, very important discussion, considering that there's current legislation that will treat things in a certain way when things go pear-shaped. And so, Thorsten, thanks for raising it. I think it's a really great discussion that you've had here. But it also brings up the issue. I think it's going to be great learnings, right, Allison? Like whatever it is we're up to here, and the reality that Thorsten's painting for us, is going to give us great learnings. And it's definitely something we might need to delve in, or we should delve into a lot more, because that's going to be like current day legislation meeting blockchain and meeting all this crazy stuff that we're up to here, to see what works, what doesn't work, and how could things work better. But it also brings up the question of the governance framework around this particular use case that we're playing with in terms of Catalyst School, doing the training, issuing a verified credential for the training that they're doing, and they operating as the Catalyst School entity. And Proofspace may be providing the technology that's processing this data. But then the question is, who's working with the issuer tool? Because the person that has, or the entity that has access to that issuer tool and owns the issuer tool, has some set of data, and that is separate to the data that Ideascale is going to have once the person shares the credential with Ideascale from their holder wallet to Ideascale. So I think maybe the governance framework is raising its head here in a way, and it's something that we also need to start thinking about. And then I think it would be nice for someone with Thorsten's expertise to look at that and then say, well, based on his knowledge of current regulation and GDPR and all of those things, you know, where are the loopholes still, what's missing, and where could we be caught out if something goes wrong, and who's to blame? It would be nice to get those learnings from this experiment. So, and I know it's an experiment. So yeah, I think there's a lot of learnings to be had.
It's a great point about the governance framework, and you reminded me of something, Anushka. Another reason why we backed away from making the course mandatory, because that if you read the proposal, that's how it was phrased, was that the onboarding course would be mandatory. But the governance framework decisions around a mandatory course are very intense. So who's an issuer, to your point? Who's allowed to issue that credential if the course has to be taken, if it's mandatory? What's the content of the course? What qualifies as taking the course? Do you have to pass a quiz? Do you have to just show up? What does it mean to show up? What if I don't want to do an online course? What if I just want to do a written material? Does it have to be in English? And the work set involved in trying to define the governance framework for an onboarding course within the context of a decentralized community, it became quickly clear to me was well beyond the abilities of the project to handle. So it was one of the reasons why we switched, one of the many reasons why we pivoted from having a mandatory course to an opt-in course with the credential not playing any public role, because for exactly that reason, there's no governance framework for the onboarding course. Catalyst School is a group of volunteers. They do their best. They haven't been certified or credentialed or legitimized by the community. There isn't a test that would certify that somebody has actively participated and engaged in the knowledge. So yes, you're exactly right. That is a big part of the experiment around the importance of how important is it to have an onboarding course. And I thought of two other points that I wanted to make there. One was Catalyst School isn't going to collect any data about anybody. So the functionality is there. Participants could register and the credential could have all kinds of metadata or data fields about the participant and the course and the date and the fund number and all of that. But for keeping it simple, and because of the lack of governance frameworks and for the pilot, none of that information will be transmitted to Catalyst School, to their dashboard, and none of that information will be recorded, or very minimal information will be recorded in the credential, and none of it will be publicly visible. So that all gets, I mean, that governance questions have really factored into the design of the experiment. I am hoping there are a lot of people in the Catalyst community that have a lot of experience around course credentialing and the content that would need to be in part of an onboarding course and how that might get legitimized by the community. I'm hoping that will be an independent project that will develop, post this Fund 10 pilot. But the thing we need to see is, what does the data show? And I wanted to comment too on the point about failure. I'm very open to the data saying that actually the onboarding course did nothing, and then maybe it's an optional thing to have for those who want it, but maybe that's not the way to address these problems. I mean, I think it is, or we wouldn't be doing this, but I'm very open to learning lessons from what happens and seeing how we improve and make things better in the next go round. I saw a hand flash up and then flash down.
That was me. I totally second.
Yeah.
I totally second what you say. So I mean, there is just so much you can bite off an apple at one moment in time. There might be other bites which I have to kind of probably put forward as a proposal and then see how that lands. the question I have to Anushka in itself is this topic is not a specific one which is kind of in relation to PAs or VPAs. That's a generic topic when it comes to SSI in conjunction with the current legislation around personal identifiable information. Is there any activity on the IOD side at the moment, or is that kind of a topic which is screaming for getting addressed in a specific way, like, for example, through a proposal to dig a bit deeper on that one? Of course, Allison is trying to solve a problem now, which is actually not specific for this concrete case, but it's a generic problem, which is almost like you have to get that one solved to understand the implications which she is trying to solve. Yeah, and I get it. I mean, that's going out of scope.
So I'm going to share with you based on my experience, right, and what I understand of SSI. So based on my understanding, SSI will actually help tick a lot of the GDPR boxes, right, in terms of regulation. And we can get Lohan to come in and talk to us about how and why, and maybe there's people on the call that can go into the details of that. However, what I do find is that I can offer a course like Catalyst School on PAs, and I can contract with Proofspace, and I can say, hey, I'm issuing a credential. I, as Anushka, is issuing a credential for PAs, and it's part of the whole Catalyst governance process. And then people could just share with me the information that I'm asking for, and I could sell their information and not even, share it with the Catalyst School. Like, how do people know that they can trust me to do what I'm saying I'm going to do and not do something silly with their information? And, through a few experiments that I've run on my own as well, what I realized is, well, it's quite easy to take someone's logo off the internet and say, hey, I'm Catalyst School, I'm doing a PA course, share this personal information of yours with me. And then I take it and I go and sell it for some money somewhere. And I don't use it for the purposes I collected it. But there's no way that people will know whether I can be trusted to say what I'm going to do or whether I can't be trusted. And so my understanding is that your trust registries and your governance frameworks is the next layer of SSI that's going to create the trusted SSI ecosystem. And this is why, like when I say to Allison, I think we're starting to talk about governance frameworks and trust registries in the conversation we just had. And when I'm saying this, I'm not saying go heavy-handed, have all your I's dotted and all your T's crossed, but at least start with the basics of saying, yeah, it is kind of the chicken and egg situation. But at least have your basics in terms of saying, this is what we're currently doing. This is, how the data is currently managed. These are the organizations that are currently involved. This is the DIDs of the organizations that are currently involved, so that people can actually start seeing, what's going to be done with this information, how it's going to be used, and who are the trusted actors. So in this case, Catalyst School will be the issuer and Ideascale will be the verifier of this, and that will be listed in a trust registry somewhere. So
IOG will be the verifier, not Ideascale.
Okay, yes, IOG, because they're using the tool Ideascale. So then at least people know, okay, these are the DIDs that I need to trust in the ecosystem that are saying they're going to do X, Y, and Z with my information. So I think the problem is trying to be addressed. So if you look at the trust over IP stack, you'll see some of the work being done by trust over IP to kind of encourage trust being built into SSI ecosystems. And that's kind of where the industry is at the moment. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, Thorsten, in terms of what is IOG doing in the SSI space. And I don't know whether your question was broader than that in terms of
I was almost kind of digging for do we have already kind of the magic source, or do we have to kind of brew it first? And is that something which, you see, the discussion often is very much of a technical one, a technology discussion of which technology can we use to do this or that. I mean, my background is one of an enterprise architect in an international company. And the problem is often not a technology problem. That's a problem in its own rights and means, kind of make it work. But there are these other elements around governance. I totally agree with you, and legal, and that is kind of, you can't, when you're having a certain size, you cannot blissfully ignore that anymore, because it bites you really heavily if you do, because GDPR, and it ramps up. GDPR says, oh, we're going to fine you as a company with 4% of your annual turnover. And I mean, annual turnover is kind of revenue. It's not profit, it's revenue. And companies ignored that very blissfully in the past. And there are some cases which kind of have been bitten, for example, Google. And they could say, how do I know? Yeah, but there are certain rights an individual then has. And if you're not able to execute against that, they can put you really on the hot stove and kind of cook you. And the regulator has absolutely leaves no doubt that they will effectively fight the case of the data subject. So in that case, I get all of that. If you don't have the answers yet, that's fair enough. Decentralized in itself is new technology and it doesn't really fit yet. But nevertheless, we still have to take a responsible approach. And if it's a generic problem in itself, perhaps we have to start to dig deep with the relevant people. And that was my question. Are you doing something already on your side? And the answer sounds like kind of, but not really. Yeah.
So I think Thorsten, on the self-sovereign identity side, in terms of that product that's being built out, that would be my answer that I just gave. In terms of IoG as a whole, I know that we have our legal team. I know that we've got our privacy policies in place. And I know that they talk about safeguarding the data held by IoG, and managed by IoG. So our legal team usually checks those boxes. However, when projects like this are doing things, and if Allison's working closely with IoG, and this work falls under the privacy policies of IoG, then it may be covered under what our legal team has done. But if this project is running as a catalyst project outside of IoG or alongside IoG, then I'm not sure if it is covered.
Yeah, and that was actually my point.
It would, right, but my point is there's not a difference between ProofSpace being a service provider to IoG any more than there's a difference between Ideascale being a service provider to IoG.
No, if it's contracted actually by IoG, if so they are, you see, the point is there is an ownership, and then you kind of say, I'm not processing the data myself, I give it to someone else to process. And with doing that, you have to tell them how they have to process it. If IoG is holding all of that in their hands, then all good. If that chain of command gets broken for whatever reason, and we are putting additional players into the game, like, for example, Catalyst School, which in itself is not even legally represented in a certain way or form or shape, and they become by a sudden custodian of that data, then by a sudden, from the law perspective, it's kind of like, okay, the data comes from IoG, IoG is giving it to Catalyst School, but doesn't make sure that they can process or do process the data in a specific way, then they will be liable if something goes wrong, even if it's on the Catalyst School side. And that's the points which kind of like are coming out of this dynamics now. And my question was just like, do we have our arm around it? And I don't know.
And my answer to you is yes.
Okay.
We are in discussions with IoG on exactly these points.
Yeah. So
and I would actually encourage everybody to look at the terms and conditions that we agree to when we sign up to Ideascale, because that to me is actually a much or a very big issue and problem in and of its own right. I think that because Ideascale is an independent company, and I think they have rights to an awful lot of our data that we put into their platform.
But the point is, I would sign up on Ideascale driven by effectively a data controller, which is IOG. So if I, as a data subject, have a problem with something that my data gets leaked, I would go to the commissioner and say, my personal data has been leaked and the data controller is IOG, and they would knock at the door and say, what did you do? So it's not my problem. So it's not the problem of Ideascale. It's actually the problem of IOG in that context. I understand what Anushka says. They had looked at it and their legal team is kind of sure that it's all good and healthy. It's just we're introducing now additional partners into this whole game. And as long as they keep their arm around it, we are safe. The problem just occurs if they then by a sudden say, well, actually we don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm changing focus a little bit from data privacy to data ownership. And I need to research this more myself, but somebody had told me, and I am consciously changing focus here a bit, but somebody had told me that we give up rights to our ideas to Ideascale, that Ideascale in some senses owns our ideas and our proposals when we post them on their platform. And I don't remember who told me that, and I don't know if it's true. So I'm not claiming that as a fact. I'm raising it as something that we should probably look into as a community.
Yeah, taken. But again, you don't sign up on Ideascale by their own means. The driver for that one is kind of like, that's the platform which Project Catalyst is using, and Project Catalyst is effectively embedded in the legal entity of IOG.
Well, that's debatable. I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But does that mean that IOG is the source of funds for all of us who are funded from Catalyst?
Sorry, say that again.
Does that mean that IOG is the source of funds for all of us that are funded from Catalyst?
That's another question, and it's a good one. Again, and it goes into a number of other rabbit holes. I totally get it.
It does, and not one that we should start debating at 75 minutes into this, or more longer than that, because we ended the main town hall early. So actually, I think that this has been a hugely productive conversation. I've learned a lot and gotten some great feedback and comments and questions. I thank everybody for the lively participation. I think we probably should wrap it up at this point and end the recording. I will say again, please keep an eye on this project. Please continue to give me feedback. I'm going to be taking the same presentation to a couple of other town halls. The European town. Yes, LATAM.
Yeah.
Y voy a tratar a hablar en español. Por favor, ayúdame. Yeah, so we'll keep the conversation going and hope that we can have a successful Fund 10 pilot. So with that, let's say, I will say good night from my end, or good epoch to everybody, and continue the conversation at a later date. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.